The restaurant was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft movement of waiters carrying expensive meals between tables, but at the largest table in the room, a millionaire sat completely alone. He watched people talk with animated faces, yet the sounds around him meant nothing. 43-year-old Elias Veyron had been deaf since childhood, and over the years he had learned to read expressions, lips, and gestures better than most people could read words. Still, there was one thing he had never learned how to accept: being surrounded by people and feeling completely invisible. That afternoon, beneath the bright natural light pouring through the tall windows of the elegant restaurant, Elias sat before an untouched plate, staring at the empty chair across from him. He had money, influence, beautiful homes, expensive cars, and everything people assumed could make a person happy. But when his birthday arrived each year, nobody sat beside him. Nobody knew that he still saved a seat for the one person who had once promised never to leave him alone. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can create second chances and change someone's life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can reach a heart that the whole world has forgotten. That afternoon, Elias had chosen the restaurant because it reminded him of his mother. Years earlier, she had brought him there when he was a young boy, back when the place was smaller and the tables stood beneath wide windows overlooking a busy city park. His mother had worked 2 jobs, yet she had saved enough money for one special lunch every year. She always told Elias that having less money did not mean having less dignity. She had taught him to notice people who were ignored, to be patient with those who communicated differently, and to never judge someone by what they could or could not hear. After she passed away, Elias built his company into a financial empire, but the memory of those simple lunches remained more valuable to him than any business deal. Every year, on his birthday, he returned to the same restaurant and ordered the meal she used to love. That day, however, Elias barely touched his food. His eyes kept drifting toward the entrance. The manager had already greeted him twice, and several wealthy customers recognized him, but nobody approached his table for more than a few polite seconds. Elias was used to it. People were comfortable speaking around him but uncomfortable speaking to him. Some assumed that because he could not hear, he could not understand. Others simply did not know what to do. Elias had stopped correcting them long ago. Across the restaurant, 29-year-old Maribel Santos was cleaning tables while carrying her 10-month-old baby, Nia, in a small front carrier whenever the restaurant became busy. Maribel worked as a cleaning lady during the daytime because childcare was expensive and she could not afford to leave her daughter with someone else. Nia had large curious eyes, soft dark curls, and an unusually observant nature. She watched everything. She watched people laugh. She watched waiters move. She watched Maribel wipe tables and quietly counted the seconds whenever her mother disappeared behind a door. Maribel had noticed Elias many times before. She knew he was deaf because the manager had explained that employees should face him when speaking and use written notes when necessary. She also knew that most employees avoided his table because they were afraid of making a mistake. But Maribel had never been afraid of him. To her, he was simply a man who looked lonely. While Maribel cleaned a nearby table, Nia suddenly leaned forward in her carrier. Her eyes locked on Elias. The millionaire was staring down at his untouched dessert, and for some reason, Nia began smiling. Then she stretched both tiny hands toward him. Elias noticed her. At first, he looked behind himself, assuming she was reaching for someone else. When he realized she was looking directly at him, his expression softened. Nia waved her hand again. Elias smiled and lifted his hand in response. Maribel quickly apologized with an embarrassed expression, but Elias shook his head and smiled. He motioned that it was fine. Then something completely unexpected happened. Nia wriggled free enough to reach toward the table. One of her tiny fingers caught the corner of a folded paper napkin. Before Maribel could stop her, the baby grabbed it and held it out toward Elias. Elias stared at the napkin. Then he looked at Nia. She pushed it toward him again. For the first time that afternoon, Elias laughed. He could not hear his own laugh, but he could see Maribel smiling in surprise. He took the napkin, folded it carefully, and made a small paper bird with the same simple technique his mother had once taught him as a child. He placed the paper bird on the table and pointed toward Nia. The baby squealed with delight. Maribel watched the scene from several steps away, afraid that someone would complain. Instead, Elias gestured for her to come closer. He took out his phone and typed a message asking Nia's name. Maribel showed him the answer. Elias typed again, asking how old she was. When Maribel answered, Elias looked at the baby with genuine amazement. Then he typed something that made Maribel's expression change completely. He asked whether Nia had eaten lunch. Maribel hesitated. She admitted that she had packed only a small snack because she had been trying to stretch her money until payday. Elias immediately called the waiter and ordered a proper meal for both mother and child. Maribel tried to refuse, but Elias shook his head firmly. He pointed toward the food, then toward Nia, and finally placed his hand over his heart. It was not charity in his expression. It was kindness. Maribel finally accepted. As Nia ate, she kept looking at Elias. Then she did something even more surprising. She reached across the space between them and placed her tiny hand against his wrist. Elias froze. His eyes filled with tears. Maribel noticed the change immediately. She asked through her phone whether he was all right. Elias typed slowly. He said that his mother used to hold his hand exactly like that whenever he felt alone. Maribel read the message and looked at him with quiet understanding. For the first time in many years, Elias told someone the truth about his birthday. He explained that his mother had died before she could see the company he built. She had been the only person who never made him feel different. She had learned sign language for him when he was a child, even though nobody else in their neighborhood knew it. When Elias became wealthy, he tried to give her everything she had never had, but he was too late. All he had left was a photograph and the memory of her hand in his. Maribel listened without interrupting. Then Nia dropped her spoon. The little girl looked at Elias and burst into laughter. Elias smiled through his tears. Something inside him changed that day. He realized that loneliness had made him believe people stayed away because he was difficult to understand. But perhaps people simply needed someone to take the first step. And that baby had taken it without fear. A few minutes later, Elias noticed something else. Maribel had returned to cleaning while her own food remained untouched. She was trying to finish her work before her break ended. Elias watched her hurry from table to table while keeping one eye on Nia. He wrote a message asking why she worked so hard. Maribel explained that she was raising Nia alone. She had once dreamed of becoming a nurse, but after her circumstances changed, she had taken whatever work she could find. She was saving small amounts whenever possible because she wanted Nia to have opportunities she never had. Elias looked at the woman, then at the paper bird on his table. He remembered his mother's words, dignity was not something money could buy. The next morning, the restaurant manager received a call from Elias's office. But Elias did not buy the restaurant, as everyone expected. Instead, he created a small employee support fund that would help workers facing childcare emergencies, transportation problems, and educational expenses. Maribel was the first person invited to apply. She thought it was another temporary favor. It was not. Months later, Maribel began taking evening classes toward her nursing dream while working fewer hours. Nia attended a nearby childcare center during the day. Elias quietly continued visiting the restaurant, but his birthday table was different now. There were always 3 chairs. One for Elias. One for Maribel. And one for Nia. The little girl eventually learned simple signs. Every time Elias arrived, she would wave her hands excitedly and sign that she was happy to see him. Elias would respond with a smile and the same paper bird he had made on that unforgettable afternoon. Years passed. Maribel eventually became a qualified nurse. Nia grew into a bright young girl who still remembered the millionaire who had once shared lunch with her mother. Elias remained wealthy, but his greatest accomplishment was no longer measured by company values or business rankings. He had learned that wealth could build buildings, but kindness could build families. On one bright afternoon, Elias returned to the restaurant and found something waiting on his usual table. It was a paper bird. Beside it was a handwritten note from Maribel. It thanked him for believing that her dream was worth saving. Elias held the paper bird in his hands for a long moment. Then Nia, now several years older, ran toward him and wrapped her arms around his waist. Elias could not hear her laughter, but he could see it. And that was enough. For years, he had believed his greatest loss was the silence surrounding him. But he finally understood that silence was not the same as loneliness. Loneliness came when people stopped reaching for one another. And sometimes, the person who breaks that silence is not a powerful executive, a famous leader, or a wealthy philanthropist. Sometimes, it is a tiny child reaching across a restaurant table with a crumpled napkin. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. Your support helps these stories reach more people who may need a reminder that compassion still exists. And before the story ends, write, "Kindness can change everything," in the comments if you believe one small act of kindness can give someone a reason to hope again. That evening, as sunlight streamed through the restaurant windows, Elias placed the little paper bird beside his plate. For the first time, he did not look at the empty chair across from him. Because it was no longer empty. His mother had once taught him that a person's greatest treasure was not what they could own, but what they could give to others. And finally, after all those lonely birthdays, Elias understood exactly what she meant.